Welcome to the Wolverine Confidential Podcast, brought to you by Corewell Health. I am Andrew Kahn.
I'm Ryan Zook.
And I'm Aaron McMahon.
Michigan opens Big Ten play on Saturday at undefeated Nebraska. Will Michigan be able to move the ball against a stout Nebraska defense? Can the Wolverines contain Dylan Raiola? We break down the matchup coming up on Wolverine Confidential. All right, guys, good to be with you here. Thursday afternoon, September 18th, about 50 hours before kickoff between Michigan and Nebraska. It's 3:40, okay, 10 full minutes past, the start block, the time you might see listed. It's on CBS last year, first year with, Big Ten action on that network. So Michigan had a few games on there, if I recall, and now the first of 2025. And it's the Big Ten opener against 3-0 but not yet ranked Nebraska team. Michigan coming off a 60-point win over Central Michigan. Should be a good one. We'll discuss the matchup, give our predictions later in the episode. Let's start with the news of the week out of Schembechler Hall. Talked to Biff Poggi on Monday, and as well as players and assistant coaches throughout the week. What did we learn from Michigan's side of things?
Well, they first of all, they understand, I think, the magnitude of the game. I mean, they've already got a loss under their belt. Another one probably wouldn't be good, especially if they still want to compete for a Big Ten title and get in the playoffs. So this game is, Jordan Marshall said it this week, but they're trying to go 1-0 every week, and I know that's cliche, but I think it means more now that they're 2-1 and they are starting conference play. So it's just like playing Oklahoma week 2 at Oklahoma, this probably isn't an ideal way to start the Big Ten conference schedule, but they don't make it. So they got to go in there. If there's one positive out of this, Nebraska isn't the hostile environment that is a Penn State, that is Ohio State, but it is going to be a road trip. It's a long one. It's a big stadium. They get loud. It's not an easy place to play. So. There's a lot ahead of them. They're dealing with injuries. They're dealing with issues along the offensive line. And we can get into all that, but they're certainly not at 100% hanging in this game.
Yeah, I mean, Nebraska might not be Penn State or Ohio State, but it's also not like Maryland or Northwestern either. Like, I still think it's one of the best environments. It seems like in college or in the Big Ten for sure. And I mean, especially after a 3-0 start, I think the Cornhuskers fans are believing this team has a chance to actually make some noise this year. So this is a huge game for them as well.
You guys mentioned injuries. I guess, let's provide our listeners with some updates on, which players we're talking about and maybe the likelihood of them suiting up on Saturday. Let's start with Rod Moore. He's kind of the biggest name that fans have been waiting to see.
Yeah, us too. I mean, I feel like we've been hearing about him every week now. And the assumption going into last week is that we'd see him against CMU, and we didn't do it. His status, I don't think has changed. I would still categorize it as questionable. Lamar Morgan, Michigan's defensive backs coach, was asked about him yesterday, and he didn't really give a sign either way of whether he's going to suit up on Saturday. In reality, this is up to Rod's. This is Rod's decision. He's been cleared to play for a while now. It's when he feels most comfortable and when he feels like he's ready to get into a game. Maybe not ideal for him to get into a game, when it matters most here on the road in Big Ten play, but it wouldn't surprise me if we see him on Saturday. He's probably going to suit up. He has the last couple of weeks. He certainly will travel. Whether he gets in the game and, plays, a handful of snaps, more snaps, I don't know. I lean toward no at this point just because we didn't see him last week, but it wouldn't shock me if we saw him on the field finally on Saturday either.
Yeah, I mean, both pre-games, both the last two games, he's looked really good, looked ready to go, and we didn't see him. So until I actually see him on the field in a game, I'm not going to say either way because, I thought for sure one of these past two games might get his feet wet with a few snaps. But, I mean, even if he does play, I can't see Michigan giving him too much of a workload in his first game since the 2023 National Championship. But, just having his presence out there, even if it is for 10 snaps, would definitely help because this is a very inexperienced team on the back end.
And that's what I think is going to happen. He gets 10 snaps or so on Saturday. Obviously, no real inside information here. We don't get to watch practice. Aaron and Ryan have heard the same things I have this week, but I think this might be the week that he comes back based on kind of just what what Biff said, but maybe he's just a little more optimistic than Sharon is. I guess we'll see. How about the offensive line? Some guys were out last week, but some of the fill-ins looked good. So yeah, it might be a question of not only just who's healthy, but who they decide are the best five.
Yeah, that's just it. Michigan's going to be without Giovanni Lahai. They're starting left guard again. He's probably going to be out certainly through the bye week, and maybe for another game on the other side. But they won't have him this week. Brady Norton, their starting right guard, was more questionable, I think, heading into the week. Viv Poggi made it sound like he was going to try to practice and potentially play on Saturday. We didn't get an update when we spoke to Grant Newsome, Michigan's offensive line coach, yesterday. He still kind of categorized really both of them as questionable heading into Saturday, but Lahadi's out. So we'll see if Norton plays. If not, I know Michigan was very optimistic about the way Jake Guarnera played on Saturday against Central Michigan. I think he graded out among the highest among Michigan's offensive line. He played relatively well. I caution because it was CMU. CMU is a lot different of an opponent than Nebraska. But either way, if Norton can't play, look for Guarnera to probably start their right guard. Nathan Afobe got to start left guard last week, so I would expect that to be something similar. Now, Michigan could go a different way too, right? If Norton is back and they are happy with Guarnera, maybe they move Guarnera to the other side, or maybe they move Norton to left guard. I don't know, but as of right now, my assumption is they'll continue with Afobe at left guard, and whoever's healthiest and playing the best will probably get to start it right.
Yeah, and head coach or not offensive line coach Grant Newsome said this week too that all their guards during fall camp did play both sides to give them a little bit of flexibility there too. So yeah, at this point, I think they're just going to go with the best option there. Whoever's practiced the best this week. Who knows how much Brady Norton has been able to get in there, but yeah, I was impressed with Jake Guarnera. I mean, I get it was Central Michigan, and I think the key though will be this week in practice. Like if Norton is in there, the coaches would know better than us how healthy he looks, how he looks compared, and who they feel most comfortable with. But it is a little bit of a concern. I mean, there's been a lot of moving pieces. It seems like already on the offensive line, and yes, last Saturday was a step in the right direction, but again, Nebraska, a whole new different opponent compared to Central Michigan.
And that's something that's kind of flown under the radar, and Michigan's coaches didn't really want to talk about it this week. But I do wonder if the injury, the banged up nature of Michigan's offensive line contributed to Bryce Underwood last week, them kind of opening things up for him and allowing him to take open holes and obviously design that touchdown run that he had. So Michigan was able to cover up, I think, some of the offensive line issues last week in Central Michigan with Bryce Underwood's legs. Can they do it again on Saturday against Oklahoma? I think will may help determine this game.
All right, what else from this week? I mean, I'm looking at headlines here. Ryan, you wrote about recruiting. You wrote about Jay Sean Barham. You wrote about the offensive line and the secondary with the injuries that we just kind of hit on. Aaron, I know you talked to Brad Nessler, who will be calling the game. Stuff on the offensive line and not having Sharon Moore, et cetera, et cetera. Just some of the many headlines on MLive.com/Wolverines this week. Any of those that you want to kind of dive into a little bit here on the pod.
One more injury concern, and I'll let Zook dive into the secondary because I know he wrote about it yesterday. But Zeke Berry is also questionable to play. He didn't play last week, and Michigan had to start a true freshman, Jaden Sanders, as a result. Not ideal. Obviously, you're able to get away with it when you're playing Central Michigan. Is that going to be an issue again Saturday? Is he going to play? I don't know. It sounded like he was still kind of dealing with whatever he was dealing. I think it's a lower body injury. The way Lamar Morgan was talking, it sounded like something that prevented him from changing directions maybe a little. So it wouldn't surprise me if it's a foot or an ankle. But if he's not able to go, that can certainly be concerning for Michigan on the back end.
Yeah, that was a little bit of a surprise too. I think most of us figured that they just held them out of the Central Michigan game because of a precaution. And even Sharon Moore said coming out of the Oklahoma game, and it was like a very mild injury. But the fact that they didn't play and just Lamar Morgan's comments on Wednesday made it seem like he's not maybe is close to 100% as they were maybe hoping initially after the injury. And yeah, I mean Jaden Sanders did pretty well. I mean, the whole secondary did really well against Central Michigan, but again, there was some cracks against Oklahoma, and putting a true freshman in an environment like Nebraska for another start is a tough task. It's no matter how. I mean, Will Johnson wasn't even starting this early in his freshman year, so we'll see what happens there. If Zeke goes and is close to 100%, that's big news for the secondary. But yeah, definitely a situation to monitor.
All right. Well, this game is, like I said, 3:40 CBS. Brad Nessler, Gary Danielson on the call. As I mentioned, Aaron did talk to Brad Nessler. Did you ask him about? I mean, he is very famous among Michigan fans, but not for football. For a basketball call, he called Jordan Poole's game-winning buzzer beater in the NCAA tournament. So that's just a clip I've seen so many times now. A freshman has won it for the Wolverines. So great call for Nessler, and now we'll get to do Michigan football as well.
Yeah, I did not ask really any basketball questions. Basketball did come up though, because I asked at one point. I asked what he was maybe most looking forward to this Saturday, and he mentioned the quarterbacks, and he likened them to 3-point elite 3-point shooters. So he did get a basketball reference in there, but no, we kept it strictly to football and Saturday's game. He was a good interview. I encourage everyone to go check it out. He had some interesting comments. He said he spoke to Chip Lindsey this week. He got a chance to talk to Biff Poggi as well, and he asked a question of Biff Poggi that I don't think has been asked yet. But he told me, he asked who makes the call on 4th and short? Is it him? Is it Chip Lindsey? Who's having the final say? And I guess Biff said that he's told Chip Lindsey now in those situations to have 2 plays on deck, depending on what the field situation's like.
One thing I found interesting about that interview too, I love that he had no idea who Houston Christian was either. Yes, I mean, both Michigan and Nebraska just absolutely demolished their opponents last week. So it's hard to get a true read on these teams. It's just they have had 2 blowouts each, and then Nebraska opened with a close win against Cincinnati, and then Michigan with their tough test didn't play very well at Oklahoma too. So this is a big one on Saturday. But I did find it funny because I was surprised that Nebraska was playing a Houston Christian as well.
Also had not heard of them. I mean, and I, from someone who covers basketball too, so it's like there's a lot of schools there that you see in these exhibition games or whatever. To see one that just didn't make sense. It's like, well, there's Texas Christian, but Houston Christian, I don't know them. They've got basically the UConn logo, the Huskies. But yeah, I'm with Brad on that one. All right, well, yeah, let's kind of dive into this matchup then. It's like I said, the Big Ten opener for both teams. Measuring stick, litmus test, whatever you want to say. It's more that for Nebraska, I feel like, given that Michigan already played Oklahoma, but now it's a chance more for Michigan at proving, kind of redemption as just for the coaches more so than anything. They had essentially admitted that they, were too conservative against Oklahoma. That will not be the case against Nebraska, and we'll see how it turns out, kind of unleashing Bryce Underwood as a runner and passer.
That's exactly it, right? Like, can they duplicate what Bryce did Saturday against CMU against a better opponent is what it comes down to. They have given Bryce the green light. Biff Poggi was asked earlier this week about, the decision to kind of unleash him last week. And he said, everything's in bounds now. He can do what he wants. We're going to let him go. He's one of our best players, and we're going to let our best players play. So I think you're going to see more of Bryce Underwood taking advantage of opportunities on the ground. It seems like they've basically encouraged him to take yards when you can get them. Now there were some runs last week against CMU where he would get the first down. It's like you're waiting him to slide or get down. He didn't do it. He was trying to get extra yards. I got to think that some of that will get cleaned up, especially with Big Ten play starting here. But I think that's going to be the X factor on Saturday. If Michigan gets some yards on the ground with him to help open things up elsewhere, I think that's how Michigan wins this football game. Now, if Nebraska can keep that in check, and they're going to have to do it with a linebacker and edge. I don't know who they assign as the spy on Underwood, but like someone's going to have to have responsibility for him all game. And it's going to be critical. It's like going up against a mobile quarterback. Michigan's had issues with it in the past. We'll see if Nebraska can defend it. And look, Urban Meyer, I thought, did a very good interview this week with Big Ten Network about it. And he put it succinctly. It's a defensive coordinator's worst nightmare when you go up against a quarterback that can run, because it's hard to prepare for it. You can simulate it in practice. You can have a dummy quarterback in practice, scout team, whatever. But to do it and wrap someone up in practice and have to face this kid in the game is a totally different beast.
Life is beautiful and fragile. We fall. We get tired. And sometimes we get sick. But with Corewell Health, we are also strong. We fight disease. We battle cancer. We come together. We come back. We push forward. When the body breaks, we break through. Corewell Health. We can.
Yeah, I mean they're really going to need to get their run game going because Nebraska has been sensational against the pass all year. I guess the opponents haven't been great, but even played well against Cincinnati, and the last 2 weeks against Akron and Houston Christian really slowed them down through the air as well. And it's hard. Yes, Michigan had some big passing plays last week against Central Michigan, but I don't think you're going to want to rely on Bryce just chucking up deep 20 times this game to try and move the football. You want to establish the run game. I mean, Jordan Marshall even said this too. Yeah, there's 2 5-star quarterbacks on both sides, but this Big Ten football is decided in the trenches and who's more physical up front. And I think Michigan's going to prove that they're on a mission, or try and prove that they're on a mission to show that they are the more physically dominant team.
Yeah, I didn't want to just be lazy and, parrot that stat about Nebraska, but as far as the pass defense, I mean, none of these 3 teams have reached 70 yards against Nebraska. And I looked at their other games. Cincinnati in their 2 other games is at close to 350 yards passing. Akron's over 200. Houston Christian 170. Not a high number, but still way higher than they did against Nebraska. Now, not a ton of attempts overall, but still not a single pass of 20 yards or more against Nebraska. Only team in the country not allowed, who was yet to allow a pass of that distance through the air yet this season. And just, the completion percentage is low, the passer ratings, all this stuff, like they have been elite defending the pass, but this will be their toughest test.
And perhaps more amazingly to me, they have 1 interception in 3 games. I think just 5 sacks. I mean, they're doing it. They're limiting like the field. It's amazing to me. I'm curious to see how they do against Michigan. Right, you're going up against a freshman quarterback who's still learning the ropes, and he has to go on the road again. He didn't play particularly well at Oklahoma. Can they limit Michigan's the chunk plays? I think is what it's going to come down to. We've seen the first 3 games Michigan try and get the dink and dunk game going early with Samaj Morgan. Can that work? Can Michigan establish it early? Because if they can't, and Nebraska has an answer for it, it could be a long day throwing the football. And as Ryan pointed out, Michigan's going to try and establish the ground game. You don't want to be one-dimensional in this situation. It's the worst possible scenario to be in.
Let's talk about, the other side of the ball a little bit. Nebraska's got a dynamic quarterback of its own in Dylan Raiola, a 5-star recruit in last year's class who started as a true freshman and now is a sophomore and is just completing a ridiculous percentage of his passes, 8 touchdowns, no interceptions yet, no turnovers at all. Not really a runner. They don't run him that much, but he can. He's not just a statue back there. Yeah, and they've got a good running back. Some big bodies on the outside as pass catchers. It really looks like Matt Rule now. The program is starting to take shape under him, and this is certainly the. It's not the most dangerous quarterback they face because they already faced John Mateer. So you hope that some lessons were learned there that Michigan can apply on Saturday.
100%. It's interesting. Dylan Raiola got off to a fast start last year too. Put up some yardage, was playing clean football, and then the wheels started to fall off a little bit. And Brad Nestor was talking about it with me yesterday, and it's true. If you go back, like look at his stat line, when they went up against better defenses, he didn't play as well. Opponents had an answer for him and what they were trying to do. So this is really, I think, when we talk about measuring stick game. I think this is really a measuring stick opportunity for Wink Martindale on the defense to show that, hey, they can't have an answer. They can limit the damage with Dylan Raiola. You mentioned him not running a ton. I think that could open up the opportunity for Michigan to try and get after him. We know Wink Martindale likes pressure. He likes to bring the blitz. We saw it last week against CMU. Don't be surprised if he tries to get Jayshon Barham and some other folks involved to try and make life difficult for Dylan Raiola, because as we know, the quicker you can get to the quarterback, the more difficult the throw attempts are. That's how turnovers happen. And Dylan had a lot of them last year. He started off clean, but as I point out, as the year went on, turnovers really became an issue for him. So I think he's shown that he will turn the ball over when there's pressure. Michigan's just got to apply it Saturday.
I guess that reminds me of another big news item this week regarding TJ Guy not playing, but just one more quick note on Raiola too, and Matt Rule. It is important. I think Matt Rule is a fantastic college coach, and it's important to note that the third year everywhere he's been is really when his programs have taken off. Third year at Temple, I started off first year 2 wins, then 6 wins, and then 10 wins his third season. Baylor 1 win in his first year. Then in 2019, 2 years later, 11 wins. So now Nebraska, 7 wins last year, now 3-0 this year. It seems like when he starts to sink his teeth into a program and gets his guys and develops them, they really start to turn a corner. And when you have a quarterback of Raiola's talent, that's a big building block right there too. So I think this is a different Nebraska team than the Michigan fans are used to seeing.
You mentioned Barham. You mentioned TJ Guy. There's also Ernest Hausman, not only the lone Wolverine from the state of Nebraska, but also played for the Cornhuskers before transferring to Michigan. So yeah, he was on the Nebraska team that faced Michigan in 2022. Had 10 tackles, including a sack, in a blowout loss at Michigan Stadium that year. He then came over to the other side and put a beat down on Nebraska again. This time, got to celebrate that win in Lincoln. That was the last time they played in 2023. Naturally, we did not get Ernest this week to talk to him, but a different linebacker spoke on his behalf, Jimmy Rolder, and said yes, it's personal for Ernest, and different demeanor this week, more locked in and focused and things like that. So yeah, that'll be another storyline to watch in this game.
100%. I mean, he was voted co-captain this year. He's a guy who he's quiet, flies under the radar, does his job, and does his work, and that's it. I mean, I think he's leading the team in tackles through 3 games. He's been very good. He's been solid at linebacker, and that's what we expected. I mean, we talked coming into this year how strong deep Michigan was in the middle on defense, and he's a big part of it. So yeah, I got to think it's personal going back there. I don't think he holds any animosity to Nebraska. That's where he started his career. That's where he got to start. But to get to go back and play one more time there, it's got to be a special feeling. I think.
This is a trophy game. They're playing for the Bussin Bowl. This is the Bussin Bowl trophy, which is like 2 former players at each school that have a podcast together. Taylor Lewan being the Michigan half of that podcast. I love how it was brought up to Jordan Marshall, one of the running backs for Michigan earlier this week, and he said, I don't know what that is. I had never heard of that. But there are pictures from early in this rivalry trophy game where Michigan is posting on social media like photos with it. So I don't know if the physical trophy still exists, if Michigan's planning on bringing it to the sideline to Lincoln. I don't know that, but I thought I'd point it out.
I think it's in the trophy case in Schembechler Hall. Maybe they just haven't acknowledged it. I don't know. And I remember when it first got introduced, they made the game. I think Jim Harbaugh went on the podcast, if I recall it correctly, and did an interview and talked about it. They made it a big deal early on. I know several of the Michigan linemen at that point were big fans of the podcast and everything else. But it sounds like, as you said, Jordan Marshall didn't seem to know a lot. So clearly it hasn't been emphasized much this week. And maybe that's a product of their older head coach or interim head coach instead of Sharon being there. I don't know.
And it's funny that the reporter who asked it too was in shambles after that. It seemed like he was looking for a cool answer, and it just shut down right away. So, oh man, so that was kind of a humorous moment of the week.
All right, let's get into our predictions for this game. Michigan 2.5-point favorite last I looked in this game. So odds makers maybe not fully buying the Nebraska hype, think Michigan can go on the road and get this win. I feel like I went first, at least last week. I'll let you guys fire away with your picks. Ryan, what you got?
Yeah, man. So I was the only one that took Michigan to win at Oklahoma and got burned bad there. And I just see a very similar situation here. I do think Michigan will be better, but I feel like they need to be a lot better to win on the road. And yes, it was a huge win against Central Michigan, but I don't know. For me, it's the hardest game to pick on the Big Ten slate this week. But I'm going to take the points with Nebraska and think Nebraska wins a 1-2 point game.
Michigan wins, Michigan covers. If you would have asked me this time last week, I would have probably told you Nebraska wins. But seeing what they did with Bryce Underwood Saturday against CMU, and they can open so many doors for them, I think it's difficult to prepare for. I think it's something you can't really quantify. And I think Bryce becomes the X factor Saturday. I think he has another big game on the ground. I think Michigan plays well because of it. I'm going to take the Wolverines 24-20. I think it's a relatively low-scoring game. I don't think you're going to see a ton of big plays, but I think Michigan has enough. I think they can go in there and win.
Yeah, I'll have what Aaron's having. Just add a field goal to each team. I got 27-23 in favor of Michigan, and I feel the same way. This was a toss-up game where, I said 9-3 before the season. They probably should get one of these two being early season, toss-ups, Oklahoma and Nebraska. They didn't get Oklahoma. That doesn't mean I then, automatically saying they're going to get Nebraska. It was all about last week. It was all about how they grew from the Oklahoma loss and applied it in the Central Michigan game. I mean, it was just so refreshing. And getting Biff is part of this, but so many times you hear coaches say, we got things to fix. We're going to have to be better, but you don't really hear any specifics. And then you're kind of in wait and see mode. He was pretty specific, like after the fact, listen, this is what we did wrong. This is how we addressed it. And we're going to try to, build on that going forward. Obviously, everything easier is said than done against Central Michigan, but I believe in Bryce Underwood. I saw one story today on CBS Sports where it just listed the best pro prospects at the position, regardless of their class. So while the LSU quarterback might be the popular pick, to be the top quarterback taken in next year's draft, Bryce Underwood was number 1 overall on this list. So like I'm with that writer as far as buying into the hype. And I think Michigan's defense gets has enough healthy bodies out there, gets enough from some of the guys we mentioned that are dinged up to to slow Dylan Raiola, win the turnover battle, and win this game.
Question for you guys: how much concern do you have about Dominic Zavada?
Very little. I mean, kickers are a little it's just inconsistent. That's the bottom line. They could come and go, and he definitely want to see him make his first one in this game. He's not Mr. Automatic like he was last year so far. But if the game comes down to his leg, which I think it could, I'm confident in him.
Yeah, I'm the same way. He had a drop off year, I think, his sophomore year at Arkansas State, but it wasn't anything crazy. So I think he's been around long enough, right? I think he can kind of get out of it. And look, if you're the Michigan offense, having to lean on him to win the game or save you, you're probably not going to be in a good position to begin with. But I think this Michigan offense is just simply better than it was last year. So I don't think they're going to be in that situation. So I'm not too worried about it.
2 major conference opponents so far this year, and some disagreements on how this game will turn out for Michigan. We'll see who's correct, and please send your picks. Email them to me if you want. Akahn, AKAHN, the number 1 at MLive.com, or reach me on Twitter at Andrew Kahn with your picks. We'll have ours posted tomorrow. And one last little bit of news here, non-football related. The Big Ten will be releasing its basketball schedules for men and women later today. I may or may not have already gotten a peek at them from Michigan. So, you could see that story go up right at 5:00 today. But yeah, nothing. You learn the dates. You already knew the opponents. In the case of the men, we knew everything except the Big Ten dates. For the women, there were a couple non-conference games that, they hadn't released yet. So you'll see those. Much like the men are going to play the team that eliminated them from the NCAA tournament last year, the women will play the team that bounced them. So that'll be fun to see those rematches. There's the LA trips last year. So those LA schools are coming to Ann Arbor on both the men and women's side, which means Michigan teams are going west to face Oregon, Washington. And it's a similar deal, 2 games over 4 days, just, one trip, 2 games to Seattle and Eugene. So both very competitive schedules. A lot more bye games for the women, hosting, mid or low major schools. The men, it's a little more high major heavy with some, neutral site games as well. But stay tuned for those on MLive.com/Wolverines and continued coverage leading up to, during, and after the football game in Lincoln on Saturday. Thanks for listening.